In my most recent video, we caught up on my latest thriller book recommendations, and today we're going to be catching up on my latest horror book recommendations. Similar to that video, I'm going to be going in order of books that I read the longest ago to the most recent horror books that I've read and loved. And I think it's been even longer since I've done a horror book recommendation video, so I have even more books to recommend in this video. The first book I have to talk about is Foe by Ian Reid. I'm pretty sure this is the very first book I read in 2023, if I'm remembering correctly, and it started the year off perfectly with a 5-star. I read several books from Ian Reid. I've read I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and I really enjoyed that one. I read We Spread, and that was a 5-star. And then I read this one, and this one was also a 5-star. So I feel like I can confidently say Ian Reid is one of my favorite horror authors out there. He just has such a way of writing these stories that are very eerie and unsettling and tense and uncomfortable, but you can't always figure out why. It's like everything feels normal and it feels like you're reading a real life story, but there's just something slightly off or something looming in the distance that just gives you the sense of dread while you're reading. And he does a really good job diving into different psychological aspects in his different books. In this book, you are following this couple named Hen and Junior, and they live out on this farm out in the middle of nowhere. And one day, this businessman shows up and comes to tell Junior that he has been selected to go enter into this space program. So Junior is going to have to go to space for a while, and he won't have to leave Hen all alone because they have some company planned for her while he's gone. That's the best way to describe this book. It's good to keep it really vague because you're kind of piecing together what's going on as you're reading, and it had all of the things that I love in Ian Reid's stories, with the atmosphere, the character development, the strangeness of it all, and a really fun direction that the story ended up taking. This also was just adapted into a movie. I actually just watched it last night, and it stars Paul Mescal and Saoirse Ronan as the two main actors, and it was not quite as good as the book in my opinion, but I do love those actors, so it was fun to watch the adaptation of the book anyways, but I do think the book is better. Next up is The Venue by TJ Payne. This is kind of like a thriller horror mix, and it is definitely on the campier side. So it is a little silly, a little ridiculous. If those aren't your type of things, this probably will not resonate for you, but I had so much fun with this one. It has a really vague synopsis on the back of this one. It says, Amy did not expect to be invited to Caleb's wedding, and now she doesn't expect to get out alive. Welcome to the venue, the perfect place for the super rich to get away from it all and get away with anything they want. I just really love ridiculous, silly, over-the-top thriller and horror books, especially these campier stories about class and like rich people and just seeing this group of people come together and all the ridiculous shenanigans that happen. It's intense, it's fast-paced, it's surprising, and it is so much fun. Next up is Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This was my second book I read from Megan Giddings. I've also read The Woman Could Fly, and I love that one as well, so Megan Giddings is also becoming a favorite author of mine. In this story, you're following a Black woman named Lena whose grandmother dies, and once her grandmother dies, who's kind of like the main supporter of her family, Lena decides that she needs to drop out of college so that she can make more money to help support her own mother, who is not able to work and provide for herself. She ends up coming across this opportunity to take place in this medical research, which is going to be something that pays her a lot of money, and she decides that that is worth going and doing, and she ends up discovering some harrowing things going on at this medical research facility. This book touches a lot on class and race and privilege, and this exploration of the real life horrors that happen to minorities in the medical field in real life today. What I love most about it was the writing and the way Megan Giddings really immerses you in this story with this character. This becomes a very disorienting experience for your main character, and the way that the story is actually written also disorients you as the reader, and so you really feel like you're going through this journey with her. I think it was just done really masterfully, and I cannot wait to read more from Megan Giddings. Next up is a bigger book, but I think it is worth the read, and that is Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. This is a long book. It's a chunky read, but the writing and the story and the characters are all so good that you just get so immersed in the story, and it doesn't feel like a big burden to get through the book. It's a widely encompassing novel that explores a lot of different characters and themes on a wide timeline. You're kind of jumping around in different countries and different times and different generations through this family. But where the story all kicks off is where you're following a father and a son who are trying to escape their situation after the wife and mother has just died, and they're kind of running away from the wife and mother's family. You're following these characters throughout the years as they uncover I think the book describes it as like a demonic cult or a demonic family. You're discovering what's going on in the demonic family. You move back and forth in time from London in the swinging 1960s to the brutal years of Argentina's military dictatorship and its turbulent aftermath. It's a novel like no other, a family story, a ghost story, a story of the occult and the supernatural, a book about the complexities of love and longing with queer subplots and themes. This is the masterwork of one of Latin America's most original novelists. And it is all those things, and it is very good. If you like really being immersed in the story where the world just feels so rich, the characters feel so rich, you get really invested in the emotional aspects of the characters, then this is definitely the type of story I would recommend to you. There are a lot of horrific things explored in this novel in a couple different lenses. There's like real life horrors and supernatural horrors and just all kinds of goodness. So highly recommend. Next up is for those of you who like weird horror books. And that is the book of The Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran. This is my first novel from Sarah Gran, I believe, and I definitely want to read more because this was an adventure. In this story, you're following a woman named Lily who likes to collect and sell rare books, and in this story she is on an adventure trying to find the Book of the Most Precious Substance, which is a 17th century manual on sex magic rumored to be the most powerful occult book ever written. It is very strange, this whole concept and the fever dream aspects of this book, what's going on with Lily and her personal life, what's going on with her as she's going on this journey, and the people that she encounters along the way. It's just a weird, wonderful time. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Sarah Gran's other stories are like, because this just felt unique and fun and the perfect amount of weird. Next up is another one for fans of campy horror, and that is Burn the Negative by Josh Winning. When I was reading this book, I was like, you can 100% tell this author loves horror films because you can feel so much inspiration into this book. It is just the perfect love letter to the horror genre, especially like campier slashers, the 80s and 90s horror films. You can just tell all of that is infused in this story. In this one, you're following a woman named Laura, who is a former child actress. When she was a child, she was the child star of this horror movie that was made that then became infamous because all the cast members from that movie ended up dying after the movie was made in ways that mirrored the way they died in the movie. So it's been like this cursed film that Laura's been trying to run away from ever since, and now she is an adult. She's trying to move past that life. She's a journalist, and she gets sent on this assignment to write about this new TV show that's being made, and it turns out that it is a remake of the original horror movie, and now she's back on set and she's back immersed in this world, and now people are dying again, and she's trying to get to the bottom of what's going on but also stay alive. This was a wild time. The ending especially just has this big cinematic explosive type of ending, and I just really highly recommend it for people who love horror movies. A quieter horror book that I enjoyed recently is Moon of the Crusted Snow. This is a post-apocalyptic story, but it's not dramatic. It's very quiet, meaning there's not a lot of intense action happening. It's just like slowly, eerily creeping up on you as this tension is being built, and the whole time you're like, oh gosh, is something bad gonna happen? Because it feels like something bad's gonna happen, and you're just kind of waiting to see what direction it's going to go. It's been a while since I've read this one, so I can't remember exactly where it takes place, but you're following a community on a reservation, and it's right when the world is starting to end. So one day their power goes out, and they're like, that's not too abnormal, but like it stays out for a while, and then the food supply trucks aren't coming in, and it seems like, oh, this might be the end times. It seems like something disastrous has happened. They're pretty far removed from the town and the city, but then people from that town start showing up to their reservation. And like I said, it's just like looming suspense. You're just like, what's gonna happen here? This book just had amazing atmosphere, both in terms of like the visual setting, but also the tone and the feel of the story. The characters also felt so complex and real, and I felt so emotionally invested in them. And I do think there is a sequel that's supposed to be coming out to this book, and I do feel like I would pick it up because I can still remember how I felt reading this story. Like I still feel connected to it, even though it's been a couple months since I've picked it up. So hopefully that sequel comes out soon. Next up is Looking Glass Sound by Katrina Ward. I feel like Katrina Ward's stories are a little bit hit or miss for people, so this one might be a little bit more of a controversial pick to put on the list, but I really love Katrina Ward's stories. This is the second 5-star that I have given to one of her books. I also gave a 5-star to Sundial, and then I did enjoy The Last House on Needless Street, but that one just wasn't my absolute favorite. They're all kind of different, but you can feel Katrina Ward's writing style through all of them. She has a very particular way that she crafts her stories, where she's not throwing all this information at you and laying everything out on the page. There's like a lot of of undercurrents in the stuff that she's writing, and it has a very slow-paced, eerie kind of feel to it as well. This book especially is lower on plot, higher on character development. So if you are looking for something with like a lot of actiony plot, this is not going to be for you. But if you like getting immersed in a character's story or stories about friendship and just generally the darker parts of the human psyche, then I think you would enjoy this one as well. In it, you're following a character named Wilder who takes a vacation one year to this little beach town with his family, and that basically changes the trajectory of his life, and you're following him in the years to come. Through the course of the story, it starts to teeter on the edges of the real and the surreal, and it ends up going into some interesting conversations, or really just like starting some conversations about authorship and the craft of writing itself. So it's a little bit meta in that way too, and I just thought it was amazing. I was like mind blown when I was reading it. I thought it was so clever, so well done, and I feel like every time I finish a Katrina Ward book, I'm just like, yes, I want more. Let me go pick up the next one. Next up is another kind of unpopular opinion, and that is Sucker by Daniel Hornsby. I just realized both this book and Looking Glass Sound were both book club picks of mine for my members book club. So we have a live show discussion every month where we dive into a book that we vote on, and this was, I think, August, and I think this one was September of this year. And if you remember, you can always go back and watch those at any time. So if you're curious to really hear deep dives of these, or you've read them and want to like go back and hear that, if you are a channel member at my highest tier, you will have access to full discussions for both of these books. This one definitely was not a crowd pleaser. This one is probably the lowest rated book out of this whole list, if I had to guess, in terms of average rating on Goodreads, because it's weird and it's slow and probably kind of boring to a lot of people, but I just really enjoyed the character voice in this one. It really carried the story for me, and just the direction the story went, I really enjoyed it. This book is a satire on like the tech capitalist corporate America world. You're following a guy named Chuck Gross, who is the son of these like rich conservative people, and he's trying to escape that part of his life. So he takes like a hard 180 and ends up working at this record label, and he works with a lot of like punk artists who are really anti-establishment and whatnot. Like he's really trying to move his life in a different direction, or so he thinks he is. And then one of his old friends from college, who's named Olivia, she has founded this new biotech company that is reinventing the field of medicine, and she ends up having him come onto the company. He comes on as like a creative consultant. He's in need of money, so he decides to do this, to take this job on, and he, by doing that, is one, living a divided life, because he like says he wants to be one thing, but then he's kind of like going into everything he says he's against, and he starts to uncover some of the dark things going on in that world. It's a satire, so it's a little silly by the end, a little over the top, but I had a lot of fun with it. I really liked the commentary of this one. I really liked looking at Chuck as a character and really dissecting him and criticizing him. He's not a character that you're gonna like while you're reading this book. You're probably gonna hate him the longer the story goes on. And this book also reminded me of another one of my favorite horror books, which I'm sure I've put in a recommendation video before, but The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This book reminded me a lot of that one as well, because they have a lot of similar themes. They both have punk rock elements to them, stories of complicated friendships, especially between men and women, and also stories about like monsters in a metaphorical way, but also kind of a supernatural way. Like, is it supernatural or is there something real life going on here? So if you like The Pallbearers Club, I do think this is a good comp title for that, and it would be worth checking out. If you read The Pallbearers Club and you absolutely hated it, I would go ahead and say probably don't try to pick this one up, but I liked it, I had fun with it, and it was really fun to discuss. Next up is Linghun, and this was a buddy read for the 24-hour Horror-A-thon, which is a bi-monthly read-a-thon that I host. So we are just on a roll of all these books that I had selected for discussions or buddy reading, and they have turned out great, so that's amazing. I love when that happens. This is a really unique little horror novella that is best to go into without a ton of information. So I'll just say, if you like stories about grief, if you like gothic stories, if you like kind of weird horror, then I would recommend going into this book. I think you're gonna have a good time. Essentially what you're following in this story is a character who is moving into this new town with her family, and then she's kind of starting to understand what's going on in the town, and it dives a lot into different perspectives of grief and it kind of feels like a nightmare. Like there is a surreal kind of feel to the whole book. Thinking back on it, it feels like a weird dream I had one time, and those are my favorite kind of books. Next up is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. I just read this about a week and a half ago, so this is very, very recent. I have not even talked about this in a monthly wrap up yet, but I did really enjoy it, so I needed to include it on this list. This is a weird and disturbing kind of horror story where you are following this girl named Natsuki who just feels like an outsider in her life. That is the main theme that this is going through. She feels like she is from another planet, she is an alien, and she is seeing all these Earthlings and all these people who get brainwashed by society and the factory, as she calls it, of getting married and having babies so that they'll grow up and get married and have babies. And she does not fit that mold, and she does not want to fit that mold. And you're following her, she is navigating life. And oh my gosh, you will never believe where this story goes. This is a journey, and I'm haunted by one of those last images at the ending. If you've read this one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Prepare to be wildly uncomfortable if you're going to pick this one up. Do not let the cover fool you. And then my final book on the list is a book I quite literally just finished last night, but it was so good I had to put it on the list, and that is The Center by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui. This is so good. It's so good. It's so delicious. So wonderful. I love a strong authorial voice. When I'm reading the first chapter and I'm immediately sucked in, where I'm just like, ooh, I want to be in this author's head for however many pages I have, because they just have such an interesting way of expressing their thoughts. This book did exactly that. I was immediately sucked in and I was like, oh, I cannot wait to see where this is going to go. In it, you're following a woman named Anissa who grew up in Pakistan and then she moved to England, and now she is going to this place called The Center. The Center is this place where you can go to learn a new language, and Anissa wants to be a translator of great works of literature. So she's very excited to go to the center, gain a new language, and she thinks that's going to be what fixes her life. You know, what sets her up for this job she's really wanted after having a lot of hardships with love in her life and relationships. She's like, I'm gonna go to the center, I'm gonna learn German, I'm gonna be a great translator, and I'm gonna have everything I want. But the center comes at a cost. And there are some horrifying things going on that she ends up discovering as she gets closer to the center and the people who are there. One of my favorite types of horror is the type where I'm just like, what is going on? Where you're like reading a story and you have no idea, and it's not giving things away too fast. It's really like slowly dragging you on and making things feel weirder and more uncomfortable and more eerie, and starting to maybe get some ideas going in your mind, and it's just dragging it out, dragging it out, dragging it out, and then it's like, boom, this is what's going on. And you're like, wow, that's a lot. The whole book in general just has so many interesting things to say, diving into themes of race and class and translation and language and colonialism. There's just so much to unpack in this. I think this would be an excellent book club pick if anyone is looking for a book club pick to end the year on. Definitely think there's a lot to discuss in this one, even though it is a shorter book. It's under 300 pages, but wow, packed a punch. It was a wonderful time. And I believe this might be this author's debut novel. It said that she's published short stories, reviews, translations, essays, monologues, and poetry. So I think this might be the debut. And this actually came from Gillian Flynn's imprint. If you did not know, Gillian Flynn, the author of Gone Girl, has her own imprint now where she is helping to get books published. And I did try to read another book from that imprint, Scorched Grace, before, but I ended up DNFing it. And I didn't even know this was with Gillian Flynn's imprint until I was like halfway through the book and loving it. And then I was like, wow, well, let me go see what else is coming out under that imprint, because this was so good. So that is it for all my latest horror book recommendations. Let me know down in the comments below if you plan on picking any of these up, and let me know if you have any additional recommendations that fit the vibes of any of these books that you think I should pick up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!